Here is how I'm getting rid of my colonial behaviors. And when I talk about this, probably a lot of people are like, wait, Estelle, but you're not in any way part of that history, right? Where colonialist powers were prevalent and somehow accepted behavior back in the day. You are not part of it, so how can you be having these behaviors? And as I reflect and work on my own behaviors of how I show up and who I am, I also realize that I have been educated in the West. I have grown up in a oppressed society by the Soviet Union where I had a lot of inferiority complexes. And I've also been part of the system, the UN system, that made me certainly feel like I was somehow better off or more expert than others. So I was reflecting on all of my behaviors that I no longer want to have, and all of the behaviors that I don't want other people to have towards me. So I was looking at three ways that I have detected in my own life how these behaviors show up. And the first one is the savior behavior. The second one is superiority and inferiority behaviors, right? And I have been in both. And the third one is discrimination. And the reason why I want to talk about this in relation to transitioning that I haven't realized for a long time, but how embedded these obstacles are as we move in the transitioning to the private sector or to the within the humanitarian sector. As we move in transitioning, I realized how much these type of behaviors are impeding our success, how they're stopping us to be doing certain things, and therefore we're not really getting to living the life we want to. So that's why I'm hoping that by sharing my example of how I have worked on getting rid of those colonial behaviors, as I call them, that essentially create inequality, inequity, and how I'm solving them as I go through and move in my life. So the first one is the savior behavior, which I believe all humanitarians can relate to it, right? Now, in the savior behavior, the essential thing that I have found is, especially as I joined humanitarian work back in the day, I believed, so this is 15 years ago, right? I believed that I am supposed to be saving other people. I'm supposed to be helping everyone, and that help somehow had no limits, right? So I was not only I was the savior in my family, and that's why I ended up taking care of so many families at some point, but also I believe that at workplace I was supposed to be saving everyone. Now, as such, a lot of people would say, well, you have great intentions, and probably that was true, except the intention was coming from me believing I'm better than others, or me knowing the answers better than others, or in some way undermining their capacity of knowing the answers or using those answers. And that was where the savior behaviors was coming from. So, in other words, I was doing all of this to feel good about myself and confirm that by helping them, by supporting them, helping them, I was continuously confirming how my superiority somehow was a good thing and feeling good about myself for that reason. Right? And then I started questioning all of those behaviors and started looking at, okay, why am I believing that I'm in a position where I'm better off or I'm the one who's supposed to save others? Why do I believe that I am in a somehow superior position than others, and why am I undermining their capacity to be able to help themselves? Right, as I started reflecting on those, I started also realizing that I was believing the reason why I was doing it, that it was somehow noble, it was great, and I had the resources that other people didn't have. And, there are some great elements to it as well. But essentially, the reason that I didn't want my savior behavior to continue is because I didn't want to feel great about myself at the expense of other people being dependent. And I didn't want to continue my savior behavior so that I just keep confirming other people's stories that they are somehow not able to, or they are somehow lacking, and just keep confirming their stories and then saying, yeah, yeah, that's why you need my help. That I didn't want to do anymore. So that meant a lot of turmoil inside me, obviously, in my family as well as I changed the way that I did humanitarian work. And I keep, even to this day, thinking about, I believe in the humanitarian work if it is an emergency response, and where we're really elevating the suffering in the first weeks, month. But if it's protracted situation, then the question is, for me, does this humanitarian support even make sense? So that's why I didn't want to be part of that, right? And the way that I have changed also my savior behavior in my own family, that I realize that the only way I can stop myself from helping others, whether it's in my family or at work, is me seeing other people as powerful, as resourceful as I see myself. So if I see myself as powerful, as able to do something to solve things, the problems, and if I see other people as powerful, as resourceful, and when I see them, would I really be then exercising my savior behavior? And I would immediately see that I wouldn't. So the way that I have solved and continue solving it comes up is by looking at myself and the other people that I immediately go for saving, let's say in quotes. I always want to see them as powerful, resourceful, amazing human beings who are able to solve this, whatever that's going on for them. As well as I see myself that way, then I see them as resourceful, equal humans. And in that case, then what kind of action would I take? And I would go for that. Now, the second thing is the superior inferior. And I talked about this, I think, a lot in this. In my journey, as I explored a lot about it. But I think some of the things that I noticed that come up for a lot of my humanitarian clients, that also used to come up for me, which is feeling like we were part of UN, and feeling like superior in some way, or more expert in some way, or more capable maybe in some way. And then as we transitioned out of the UN, feeling like, oh, where did my identity go, right? Where did all of that confidence go? And then realizing all of that was attached to the system. In other words, the system was giving us that confidence, right? And the other part of inferiority that I believe a lot of humanitarians from the global south can relate to is being in conversations or in networking events, maybe in promotions, in work situations, allowing somehow other people make us feel inferior. And as I said, as part of my getting rid of my colonial behavior, campaign with myself, I was also looking at the behaviors that I don't want other people to do that to me, right? And like allowing other people to make us inferior is, I believe, one of those things that we can actually get rid of very easily. The question that we want to be looking at is, instead of just allowing other people to make us feel inferior, or somehow we're not as good as them, or somehow we're not whatever it is that we are believing we can't get to, therefore we are inferior. The question we can ask is, why are we allowing them to make us feel that way? Right? Because as long as we keep allowing them to be right in our own minds as to how they are superior or how they are better than us, then that feeling of inferiority continue impacting our lives, impacting our choices, impacting how we apply for jobs, impacting how we show up in job interviews. So I was coaching a client as well recently, and she was telling me this, that when she goes to a certain networking events, there are people who just makes her feel like she's not as good as other people, or she's not this as other people who are expats and all of this, right? And I can see that in those environments, it becomes so easy for us to just say that, oh, that's true somehow, or we don't want to feel that inferiority, and therefore we don't even go and attend those networking events, or we don't even go and put ourselves out there, because that feeling is not comfortable or is not pleasant, obviously, right? Therefore we just keep like constraining ourselves, and then we maybe even explain then, oh, because I'm introvert, or because I'm not good at this, even though the actual reason why we keep avoiding those events, those meetings, those speaking up engagements is because we just feel like that imposter syndrome, that feeling of we're not as good as them. And that feeling can only go away if we see ourselves as powerful, equal human beings as others, and we don't allow others to make us feel inferior. So if we are allowing them to make us feel inferior, probably there is a habitual way of how we saw ourselves, and we continued that story all this time. That's one explanation, right? We're just so good, like we're just good at explaining things away as to, oh, that the reason why this is because I'm not as good as them, or I'm not this as them, and all of this stuff, right? So that's what might be one. Excuse me. The other is probably we just haven't been aware of in ourselves as to how much this feeling of like feeling inferior is impacting our lives, where and how it's impacting our lives. And also, we might believe that we don't know how to solve it. We don't know what to do with it somehow. We just feel like this is how it is, and we just continue rolling with it, versus understanding that as long as we see ourselves less and we put our others in the pedestal, whoever you are putting in the pedestal, then we are creating a disbalance in your own inner system, and that makes you then be somehow governed by their powers, right? And they somehow become so much more important. Their story becomes so much more important than your own story. And then you, instead of you reinforcing yourself and trusting yourself and feeling that confidence in yourself, you keep worrying and being afraid as to how they are showing up and how you are showing up and how you're not this, how you're not that, and then just keep reinforcing that story that is actually harming you. So that's why I would like for everyone who is in this position where it feels like, okay, I'm somehow not as them, whoever you are comparing yourself to, we need to solve that inferiority by understanding why you keep putting them in the pedestal and putting yourself less, how this is impacting you, and how you have the power to change that by removing these thought patterns, the belief patterns, in changing those to other patterns, other ways of seeing yourself. The third one is the discrimination, and I think this is the more challenging one that I would say a lot of humanitarians would also talk about. I have had my own fair share of discrimination in so many different ways. But I think one big lesson that I have learned for myself, at least, is that if I am being discriminated and I don't do anything about it except stay silent, I'm somehow being accomplice to that behavior. So let me explain. If someone is discriminating me and I see that I'm being discriminated, right? Because sometimes you may not recognize it, or it feels bad, but we can't really point, or sometimes it feels like you're not sure if it's a discrimination or qualified as discrimination or not. So I can see those points. But let's say that you can see like clearly that this is discriminatory behavior towards you, and you can see it. You can then, let's say you are in a networking event, and then someone is saying something that you can see that is discriminatory, and you just stay silent and you don't do anything, then that person will not know how this is a wrong behavior. You just stay silent, and somehow you are not approving it actively, obviously, but you are somehow being okay with it or not reacting to it, will then make that behavior not change. And you will have created that unfairness to yourself, because now you are saying, not only you are saying to yourself you can't say anything to the other person even though you know it's wrong, you can't say anything to the other person, so you feel bad about yourself, right? Plus you are now creating an incident where your brain is saying, okay, next time we're not going to such networking events anymore, because if this is how we're going to be experiencing some of the conversation, why bother? Therefore, you are constraining yourself, right? And you keep that conversation or that fear that you've probably had a long time before, that says no matter how you react, you won't be able to solve it. And then that makes us feel powerless, right? So that's why the way that I have come to realize, at least for myself, how do I want to respond to other people discriminating me, and I notice it and I see it, instead of going to either silent mode and fearful mode, which I used to do a lot in the past, and I see that that's not helpful at all, and it just perpetuates the discrimination even more, right? Instead of being silent, I have realized the way that I can react to it is I can actually point it out and say if this is what they intended, right? So I will give you an example. There was a boss of mine in one of the emergencies, and he somehow liked touching me and saying comments about things that were discriminatory. And after a while of tolerating this behavior, because I was like, oh my God, if I say something, he will fire me and all of those things. And back in the day, there was really no SCA components and all of this. So that's why at some point I realized, okay, if I don't do anything, this situation and this behavior not only continues, but he gets even more encouraged in some way to keep saying those things, right? So therefore, at some point, I got the guts, like the courage to come to him and say that I see these things that you keep saying are discriminatory. I don't think that's what you mean, but if you mean this, I cannot take this anymore and I need to do something about it. And back in the day, I didn't know how to report it, how to, or what reporting even looked like, but at least that's what came to my mind. And later, of course, I became more experience in detecting what discriminatory behavior is and how to call it out and say it out loud to the other person without even getting angry or frustrated. But I feel like that somehow comes with more, unfortunately, with more experience in this case, right? To be able to detect it immediately, to be able to know how this is not all right and say it to the other person as to, this is not acceptable and I would like for you to do something with it, or I detected this is what's happening, is that what you intend? And then see what their reactions are and how they can course correct their own behaviors. So the reason I think this would be so powerful for our transitioning journey is to recognize how much we are allowing these colonial behaviors, as we call them, or I don't know, maybe there are other like more scientific ways to call them, but essentially these behaviors that put some of the groups in the superiority position and other groups in the inferiority position, and all the problems that come from those positioning, how we can get rid of them in our own systems, but also how we can point them out and address them in the time if that's happening to us, so that we don't make transitioning more challenging than it already is, right? Because transitioning journey in itself, no matter who is going through, is very challenging, especially nowadays when a lot of people are struggling to go for those jobs, competing with thousands of people, going through a lot of emotional turmoil, going through a lot of unfairness that happen due to system issues, and all of those things are already happening. And if we're adding other challenges like the discrimination, like the other people's savior behaviors or superiority behaviors or our inferiority behaviors, if they keep additionally challenging our transitioning journey, then it becomes so difficult to go through, that then increases the chance of us just giving up in our process, right? And in order not to do that, I would really love to suggest to have a look at some of those behaviors that you might be maybe on the receiving end of things, or some of the behaviors that you might be committing yourself, right? And seeing how that might be impacting yourself and how that might be impacting other people as well in your own journey, so that we start being more conscious of, okay, what are the unnecessary things that we can get rid of right away so we can focus on all the other challenges and solving all the other challenges. So that's why I wanted to share how I'm solving for them and continue doing it. And I would love to invite you to do this work with me to solve yours as well, if you choose to. Okay, my dears, this is what I have for you today. I wish you a great week, and in these challenging times, at least enjoying the sun. That's what I'm going to do now. In the meantime, I hope you will give some reflection to this.